So imagine this. You're reading a massive story that spans like 400 years of history. You get to the very last page expecting this big, satisfying conclusion, and instead, you get a cliffhanger. Well, that's exactly what happens at the end of the Old Testament. The final prophetic book, Malachi, doesn't tie everything up in a neat bow. Nope, it leaves us hanging, with a broken relationship still on the rocks and a promise that someone else is coming to fix it.
To really feel the weight of this, we've got to rewind all the way to the beginning of this section of the Bible, the book of the 12th. It all kicks off with the prophet Hosea. And his story uses this powerful, gut-wrenching metaphor of a broken marriage to describe the relationship between God and Israel. It's this incredibly personal, painful story of love and betrayal.
So you'd think, right? After 4 centuries of warnings, crises, getting exiled, and then finally coming back home, you'd think things would be better. But that is the absolute shock of the book of Malachi. We get to the final chapter of this long story, and that core relationship, it's still a complete mess. The people are making the exact same mistakes that got them into so much trouble in the first place.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Where are we? When is this all happening? We're in what's called the post-exilic period. The people of Israel are back in Jerusalem after being exiled in Babylon, and you can feel the hope in the air. This is their chance to rebuild, to start over. But it is not a simple comeback story. It's more like a constant spiritual back and forth, a real ebb and flow.
You can see that struggle right here in this timeline. Look, it's a century packed with activity. They come back, they start rebuilding the temple with all this energy, but then they just kind of lose steam. It stalls out. Prophets have to get in their face just to get it finished. Then you have leaders like Ezra and Nehemiah who show up and spark these moments of revival. But you start to see the pattern, right? A big burst of commitment, and then the slow slide back into apathy, probably because rebuilding a nation from scratch was way harder and less glorious than they'd all imagined.
Now, here's what's so cool about the book of Malachi. The way it's written, it's not just some random stylistic choice. The structure of the book itself shows us just how broken the conversation between God and his people had actually become.
The whole book is structured as a series of arguments, what scholars call disputation speeches. So don't think of it like a sermon. It's much more like a really, really tense marriage counseling session. God will say something, and the people immediately clap back with a cynical question or some sarcastic objection. Malachi is literally writing down this fractured dialogue, this argument, and it just reveals the massive canyon between them.
And you can see the heart of the problem when you compare their questions to another prophets, like Habakkuk. Habakkuk wrestled with God, for sure. He asked these raw, honest questions, but he was doing it from a place of faith. He really wanted to understand. The people in Malachi's day? Oh, it's a whole different ballpark. They're not looking for answers. Their questions are defiant, they're cynical, and they are just dripping with apathy. They're not just questioning God's plan, they're questioning God himself.
And the book just drops a bomb right at the beginning. The very first dispute goes right for the jugular. It takes the most foundational belief of their entire relationship, and the people just throw it right back in God's face.
This is how God opens the conversation. Simple, powerful. This is the bedrock of their entire history, their covenant, everything. From God's perspective, it's the simple truth. I have loved you.
And their response? How have you loved us? I mean, it is just stunning. After everything, the Exodus, the covenant, being brought back from exile, their skepticism runs so deep that they challenge the very love of God. It's an absolutely explosive start that shows you just how bad things have really gotten.
And this cynicism, this doubt, it wasn't just talk. It had seeped into every single corner of their lives, from how they worshipped at the brand new temple to how they treated the most vulnerable people living among them.
See, on the surface, they were doing all the religious things. They were showing up, they were bringing sacrifices, but their whole attitude was, oh, what a drag this is. It wasn't love or devotion. It was just this heavy obligation they couldn't wait to get over with. Their actions screamed that they actually held the God they claimed to worship in contempt.
And this apathy just snowballed into this clear pattern of disobedience. Malachi just lays out the charges. They were offering their defective animals as sacrifices, the blind and the sick ones, the leftovers that their own governor wouldn't accept as a gift. They were compromising their covenant by marrying people devoted to other gods. They were betraying their own wives, divorcing the wives they'd grown old with just for personal gain. They were committing social injustice, oppressing workers, and ignoring the widows and the poor. And on top of all that, they were robbing God by holding back on their tithes. It's just a devastating list of failures.
So, after laying all of this out, how does the book possibly end? Does everyone repent? Is there some big revival? Nope. The book doesn't resolve any of this. Instead, it just leaves the tension hanging in the air and points toward the future.
This is the final, bitter challenge from the people. They look around, they see wicked people getting rich, and they've basically concluded that serving God is a waste of time. So they ask, where is the God of justice? They're pretty much accusing God of being asleep at the wheel, or even worse, of rewarding evil.
And God's answer isn't to just snap his fingers and fix everything right then and there. Instead, he promises that justice is coming. He will return. But first, he says, I'm going to send a messenger to prepare the way, someone who will get the people ready for a final, refining day of judgment.
And these are some of the very last words in the entire Old Testament. The promise is that a future prophet, someone with the spirit of the great prophet Elijah, will show up to heal the brokenness at every level of society, in families, in the community, before that final great day of the Lord arrives. The healing has to come first.
And that brings us to the whole point, right? The story is left unfinished on purpose. It forces you, the reader, to look forward, to wait for a resolution that hasn't happened yet. The Old Testament doesn't end with everything wrapped up nicely. It ends not with despair, but with a very specific kind of hope. A hope that is placed entirely on God's future promise to send a messenger, and then finally to show up himself to heal and restore what his people couldn't fix on their own.